Welcome back to the Scary Collector, the place where the darkness doesn't stay outside, where the things that crawl at the edges of your memory find their way in. Tonight, we have something special, something that has been sitting in my collection for a long time. Stories I almost didn't share, not because I wasn't sure they were real, but because clowns, the painted faces, the wide, unnatural smiles, the hollow, glassy eyes that follow you just a little too long. Most people write them off as a childhood fear, a silly phobia, something you're supposed to grow out of. But the people in tonight's stories, they didn't grow out of anything. They were changed by what they saw. 3 stories, 3 real encounters, 3 people who crossed paths with something wearing a clown's costume and walked away questioning everything they thought they knew about the world. So turn off the lights, lock your doors, and whatever you do, don't look toward the window, because sometimes when you least expect it, something out there is already looking back. Our first story comes from a man named Daniel Marsh. He submitted it to the Scary Collector through our community channel, and when I read it for the first time, I had to step away from my desk and just breathe. Daniel grew up in a small town in rural Georgia, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where the roads are narrow, the trees grow tall, and the nights are so dark and so quiet that you start hearing things that aren't there. Or so he used to tell himself. He was 9 years old when it happened. And now, more than 30 years later, he says he still can't sleep without the lights on. This is his story. It was the summer of 1992. I know the exact year because my grandmother had just passed in the spring, and that summer felt off. The whole season felt wrong. Like the air itself was grieving. My parents were quiet all the time. The house was quiet. Even the neighborhood felt quieter than usual. We lived on Callaway Road, a long, straight stretch of cracked asphalt that ran between 2 walls of Georgia pine. Our house was the 3rd one on the left. There were only 5 houses total on that road, and then nothing, just trees, a creek somewhere in the dark, and whatever lived beyond it. That summer, I started having trouble sleeping. Nothing scary about that on its own. Lots of kids go through phases, but my insomnia had a specific flavor to it. Every night, around 2 in the morning, I would wake up, not groggy, not half asleep, wide awake, like something had snapped me out of unconsciousness and planted me right in the center of the dark room. Heart pounding, eyes wide open. The first few times I didn't get out of bed. I just lay there listening. Our house made all kinds of noises. Settling wood, the creak of the hallway floor, the hum of the refrigerator. I knew every sound by heart, but during those nights, I started hearing one I didn't recognize. It was very faint, very distant, almost like it was coming from outside, through the walls, through the glass of my window. A sound like music, not real music, not a radio or someone's television. It was tinny, mechanical, like one of those old wind-up music boxes, the kind you twist a key into and it plays a little tune that sounds almost right, but not quite. Like a song you once knew, played slightly too slow, the notes bending in ways they shouldn't. I told myself it was the creek, or maybe sound carrying from the highway miles away. I told myself a lot of things. 3 weeks into the summer, I finally looked out my window. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor. My window faced the front yard, a wide stretch of dry summer grass, the mailbox at the end of the driveway, and then the road. Beyond the road was the Hendersons' place, their porch light flickering like it always did. Everything looked normal, except at the very end of our driveway, just past the mailbox, standing on the edge of the road where the tree line began, there was a figure. I pressed my face close to the glass. The night was dark, and there were no streetlights on Callaway Road. But there was enough moonlight that I could make out the shape. It was tall, very tall, standing completely still. It was wearing what looked like a suit, but not a business suit. Something loose and baggy, striped, light and dark, alternating down the length of the body. And the face. Even from a distance, I could tell something was wrong with the face. It was pale, impossibly pale, like a face painted white. And in the center of that whiteness, I could make out two dark holes where the eyes should have been, and a wide, wide smear of red. A smile. I stood at my window for what felt like an hour, staring at it. And it stood at the end of my driveway, staring back. It didn't move, didn't sway, didn't breathe. As far as I could tell, it just waited. I don't know how I got back into bed. I don't know if I slept. All I know is that when morning came, I ran to the window first thing, and the driveway was empty. The road was empty. Everything was fine. I didn't tell my parents. What would I have said? There was a clown standing at the end of our driveway in the middle of the night? My father would have laughed. My mother would have thought I was sleepwalking or having bad dreams. Maybe I was. That's what I told myself. But it came back. For nights later, I woke up at the same time. 2 in the morning. Snapped awake in the dark room with that same pounding heart. And from somewhere outside, drifting through the glass, that music again. I almost didn't go to the window. I almost pulled my covers over my head and waited for morning. But something drew me. Some horrible magnetism that I couldn't explain and couldn't fight. I looked out. It was closer. It was no longer at the end of the driveway. It had moved up the driveway, maybe halfway. Closer to the house. Closer to me. Still standing perfectly still. Still facing up at my window. The white face gleaming faintly in the moonlight. The red smile stretched so wide it looked like it had been torn into the skin rather than painted on. And then it did something that broke me. It raised one hand, slowly, deliberately, and it waved at me. I don't remember screaming. My mother told me later that I screamed so loud she thought I'd fallen out of bed. She and my father came running. I was in the corner of my room, back pressed against the wall, pointing at the window and making sounds that weren't words. My father went to the window. He looked out. Nothing. Empty driveway. Empty road. Just the Georgia night and the trees. He told me it was a nightmare. They left the hall light on and the door cracked open, and after a while, I fell into something like sleep. But I didn't stop thinking about that slow, deliberate wave. It knew I was watching. It had wanted me to see it. The next night, I barricaded myself in bed with every stuffed animal I owned piled around me. I didn't sleep at all. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening, and sure enough, 2 in the morning, the music started. I didn't go to the window. I squeezed my eyes shut and put a pillow over my head and I prayed. I prayed to God. I prayed to my grandmother who had just died. I prayed to anyone who might be listening. And then, I heard something new. Tapping. 3 soft, slow taps on glass. On my window. 2nd floor. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I heard it again. 3 taps, patient and rhythmic, like a teacher knocking on a chalkboard to get the class's attention. And then, silence. In the morning, I told my parents everything. My father went around the outside of the house looking for ladders or anything someone could have climbed. He found nothing. My mother called our neighbor, Mr. Benton, who was the closest thing our area had to a community watchman. He said he hadn't seen anything. That night, my father sat in the living room downstairs with the lights off and watched the driveway. He saw nothing. I didn't hear the music that night. In fact, and this is the part that still haunts me most, I never heard it again. Whatever it was, it seemed to know my father was watching. It seemed to understand that the game had changed. It simply stopped. I lived on Callaway Road until I was 18. For 9 more years after that summer. I woke up at 2 in the morning and held my breath and waited. Sometimes I'd creep to the window and look. The driveway was always empty. But here's the thing I've never told anyone. The summer after it stopped, I was 10. I was playing in the front yard on a July afternoon. Bright daylight, not a cloud in the sky. I was digging in the flower bed near the mailbox, looking for earthworms the way kids do, and I found something buried just a few inches below the surface, right where the figure used to stand at the end of the driveway. It was a small tin music box, old, rusted. The lid was painted with faded red and white diamonds, the pattern you see on an old-fashioned jester's costume. I didn't wind it. I didn't open it. Something in my gut told me not to. I put it in a paper bag. I walked to the creek behind our property and I threw it in. I watched it sink, and as it went under, I could have sworn. I swear to this day that I heard it play just 3 notes, like a greeting or a goodbye. Take a breath. I know. There's something about that story that crawls into a specific corner of your mind and settles there. Maybe it's the patience of it, the waiting. Whatever was out there on Callaway Road wasn't rushing. It wasn't chasing. It was taking its time, learning the rhythms of that house. Learning Daniel. Clowns, in their original form, were supposed to make people feel safe. The exaggerated features, the wide eyes, the big smile, are theoretically designed to signal friendliness, warmth, harmlessness, but there's a reason that same face in the wrong context, at the wrong hour, does the exact opposite. Researchers call it the uncanny valley. When something is almost human but not quite right, the brain doesn't settle into comfort. It escalates into alarm. It screams that something is wrong, that something is being faked. And whatever was standing at the end of Daniel's driveway, whatever left that music box buried in the dirt, knew that, and it didn't care. Let's continue. Our second story comes from a woman named Renata Voss. She's a nurse. She's been a nurse for 16 years. She works night shifts at a hospital in a mid-sized city in the Pacific Northwest. A city she asked me not to name. She is not a superstitious person. She is not someone who spooks easily. She has seen things in that hospital, real things that would break most people. She has sat with the dying. She has held hands in the dark. She has worked through losses that no one should carry. She is steady. She is practical. She is not the kind of person who writes to paranormal channels. She has never told this story publicly before. When she reached out to the Scary Collector, she said, and I want to read you her exact words, "I don't need anyone to believe me. I know what I saw. I just need to say it out loud, somewhere, to someone who won't dismiss it. Because the only thing worse than seeing something like that is carrying it alone. Renata, this is for you. You're not alone anymore." A funny man with a painted face. A funny man who didn't say anything. A funny man who just watched. Margaret said no one took it seriously at the time. Children say things. Children have nightmares. Children see things adults don't. But now she wasn't so sure. I transferred out of Building C at the end of that month. I put in the request the same day Margaret told me that story. I still work at the hospital. I still do night shifts. I'm still steady and practical, and I don't spook easily. But I do not go to room 7. Not anymore. Not ever again. There's a particular horror in encountering something inexplicable in a place that is supposed to be safe. A hospital. A place of healing. A place where people are at their most vulnerable, sick, frightened, dependent on others to watch over them. The nurses and doctors and staff who work those night shifts are, in a very real sense, guardians. They are the ones keeping watch when patients cannot watch for themselves. To have something else also keeping watch. Something uninvited. Something wearing that face. Renata is not the first person to encounter something in a hospital that cannot be explained. The night shift has a long tradition of strange stories, of things seen in corridors, of figures in rooms, of sounds that have no source. Most people don't talk about them, because they know how it sounds, because they're professionals and professionals don't say these things out loud, but they see them, and they remember. We have one more story tonight. The last one. I've saved it for last because it's different from the others. Daniel's encounter happened when he was a child. Renata's happened in the controlled environment of a hospital. Both of them, in a sense, were stationary. They were in one place. The thing came to them. Our third story is different, because in this one, the person followed the clown. His name is Theodore Callahan. He goes by Theo. He's 34 years old, and at the time this happened, he was 29. He was working as a night security guard for a large commercial complex in the Midwest. A sprawling property that included a shopping mall, several storage units, and a decommissioned entertainment center that used to be a Chuck E. Cheese-style venue. I need you to sit with that for a moment. A decommissioned children's entertainment venue, empty, dark, filled with the remnants of things built to make children laugh. Theo submitted a 50-page written account to the scary collector. 50 pages. He said he wanted to get every detail right, so he wrote it all down before he lost any of it. What I'm going to share with you is the account of a single night, the worst night. The night that changed everything. His words. His experience. This is Theo's story. I took the job because the pay was decent and it was quiet. Mostly quiet. You walk the perimeter, you check the doors, you watch the monitors, you drink bad coffee, and you wait for morning. That was the job. That was what I signed up for. The complex I was guarding, I'll call it Lakewood Commercial Park, had 4 zones. Zone A was the mall, which was about 70% occupied by stores. Zone B was the storage units along the east side. Zone C was the parking structure. And Zone D was what we called the dead zone, the old entertainment center. Fun World, it had been called. Capital F, capital W. The signage was still up when I started. Those big colorful letters in red and yellow and green, faded and cracked after years of sitting empty. The animatronic characters had been removed when the venue closed, but a lot of the infrastructure was still there. The ticket counters, the prize display cases, the jungle gym, the stage where the characters used to perform. We were told to check Zone D twice a night, once at 10 p.m. and once at 3 a.m. The property owners were worried about vandals getting in. There had been a few incidents before I started: broken windows, graffiti, some kids who had tried to camp in there on a dare. I didn't love checking Zone D. I'll be honest about that. There's something specifically uncomfortable about a children's entertainment venue when it's dark and empty. The colors that were designed to be cheerful look menacing in the dark. The spaces that were designed to be full of noise and movement feel wrong when they're silent. Like a theater stage after the show. There's a kind of wrongness to seeing all that staging stripped of its purpose. I'd been working at Lakewood for about 4 months before anything unusual happened. The first sign was small. So small I didn't even think about it much at the time. I was doing my 10 p.m. check of Zone D. I came in through the side entrance. I had a key, and walked the main floor with my flashlight. I went past the ticket counters, past the prize cases, through the jungle gym area, and toward the stage at the back. The stage was about 3 feet off the main floor with a velvet curtain, once red, now a kind of dirty rust color, hanging across the front. On either side of the stage were 2 large painted panels showing cartoon animals. A lion on the left, an elephant on the right, both of them grinning those big, frozen grins. I swept my light across the stage and the curtain. Everything looked normal, except one of the curtain panels was slightly open. Not much, just a few inches. A gap. I stood there for a moment. I knew that curtain. I had checked Zone D dozens of times, and the curtain was always fully closed. Always. It wasn't the kind of thing that moved on its own. It was heavy velvet hanging from a rod with no airflow in that building. I told myself that maintenance had been in there recently, or that one of the daytime guys had checked it and moved it. I told myself something reasonable. I checked behind the curtain. Backstage was an empty concrete space. No props, no equipment, just bare walls and an exit door that was chained from the inside. Nothing was there. I closed the curtain and finished my check and logged the visit as clear. 2 weeks later, during my 3 a.m. check, I found the curtain open again. This time it was open wider. Not just a few inches, almost a foot. Enough that I could see partially behind it from across the room, even in the dark. And again, nothing behind it. Backstage empty. Everything clear. But this time, I noticed something else. There was a smell in Zone D that I hadn't noticed before. Faint. Not unpleasant exactly. Sweet. Dusty sweet. Like old fabric and something chemical, like grease paint. Like stage makeup. I know what you're thinking. Old building, old costumes somewhere in storage. The smell seeping through. I thought the same thing. I didn't push it. The third time was different. It was a Friday night in March. About 2 months after the first curtain incident. I was on my 10 p.m. check, walking Zone D, when my flashlight caught something on the stage. A footprint. The stage had a thick layer of dust on it. Years of accumulated dust. Undisturbed because no one ever went up there. My own footprints from previous checks were still faintly visible in it from months ago. But this footprint wasn't mine. It was larger than mine. Much larger. And it was recent. The dust around the edges was still crisp, not settled, and it was the wrong shape. Even in the beam of my flashlight, I could tell. This wasn't a normal shoe print. It was too long. Comically, absurdly long, the kind of proportions you'd see on a novelty shoe. An oversized shoe. A clown shoe. I stood there in the middle of Fun World at 10 o'clock at night, looking at that footprint, and I felt something turn over in my stomach like a heavy stone. I called my supervisor. I told him what I'd found. He said he'd send someone out in the morning to check, and to finish my rounds and not worry about it. I finished my rounds. I worried about it. At 3 a.m., I went back. I don't know why. Looking back, I can't fully explain the impulse. Professional obligation, maybe. Morbid curiosity. The particular stubbornness of someone who needs to understand what's in front of them, even when every instinct is saying to look away. I went back to Zone D at 3 a.m. The curtain was fully open, and on the stage, standing behind the open curtain, was a figure. I froze. My flashlight was pointed straight at it. It was a man or man-shaped, dressed in a clown costume that was old and worn and dirty. White suit with large, faded red dots. A ruffled collar. Pointed hat. The face was painted white, with a wide red smile and exaggerated red circles on the cheeks. But none of that was what stopped me cold. What stopped me was that it was sitting down, sitting cross-legged in the center of the stage. Like a child at story time, hands folded in its lap, head tilted slightly to the left, just waiting, just sitting there in the middle of an empty stage, in the middle of an empty building at 3 in the morning. "Hey," I said. My voice came out stronger than I expected. "This is private property. You need to leave." It didn't respond, didn't move, didn't blink. "I'm going to call the police," I said. "Get up. Show me your hands." Nothing. I reached for my radio. I didn't take my eyes off the figure. I called dispatch, reported an intruder in Zone D, gave my location, and then the figure stood up. It unfolded itself from the cross-legged position in one fluid, continuous motion. No awkward shifting of weight. No using its hands to push up. No sign of the physical effort that standing up from a seated position on a floor requires. It just rose, like something being pulled upright by a string. It was tall. Standing, it was taller than any person I had ever seen. 6.5 feet, maybe more. And then it stepped off the stage. 3 feet straight down, and it landed without a sound. No thud. No impact. Like the floor beneath it hadn't registered the weight. And then it walked toward me. Not fast. Not running. Walking. Steady. Purposeful. I backed up. I kept my flashlight on it. I kept talking into my radio. Intruder approaching my position. Zone D, I need backup now. My voice was still steady. I don't know how. Stopped about 8 feet from me. In the beam of my flashlight, I could see its face clearly now. The painted smile was elaborate, layered, almost like multiple smiles had been painted on top of each other over time. Each one slightly different. The lines crossing and blending into something that was more like a wound than a smile. And the eyes were wrong. They were too large. Not painted large, actually too large for the face. Wide and pale and unblinking. And they caught the light of my flashlight in a way that eyes shouldn't. Not reflecting it the way a normal eye would, but seeming to hold it. Like the light was going in and not coming back. We stood there for what felt like a very long time. Me with my flashlight. It with its ruined smile and its light-swallowing eyes. And then it reached into its costume. I took 3 steps back. I said, loudly, firmly, "Do not move. Keep your hands visible." Pulled out a flower. A single artificial flower. The kind you get at a dollar store. A plastic stem with a fabric bloom in faded red. The kind of prop a clown uses in a children's show. It held it out toward me. An offering. A gift. I heard the door behind me open. My backup finally arriving. 2 other guards who worked the night shift. Their flashlights swept the room. "Where?" one of them said. "Where is he?" I turned to point. The space in front of me was empty. In the 8 feet of open floor between where I stood and the stage. Nothing. On the floor where it had been standing, there was a single dusty footprint. One of those impossibly long, distorted prints. The same as on the stage. And next to it, lying on the floor, a plastic flower in faded red. The 2 other guards saw the flower. They saw the footprint. They didn't say much. We finished the check, logged it, and went back to the station. Nobody wanted to talk about it. I took a week of leave. When I came back, I asked to be removed from Zone D checks permanently. My supervisor didn't argue. I stayed at Lakewood for another year. I never set foot in Zone D again. I heard that the entertainment center was eventually demolished. The property owners finally decided to redevelop that section of the complex. The construction crew apparently found some things in the walls when they started tearing it down. Old things. No one told me what exactly. But the foreman, a guy named Vic who I'd met a handful of times, called me when it happened. Just to tell me, he said, "You were right to stay out of there." He didn't say anything else. He hung up. I still have the plastic flower. I don't know why I kept it. I don't know why I picked it up that night and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Some part of me needed proof, I suppose. Something to hold on to. Something real. It sits on a shelf in my apartment now. In a glass jar with a lid because I didn't want to look at it directly anymore. I've never shown it to anyone. Some nights I think about throwing it away, but I always stop myself because some part of me believes that the only thing keeping it from coming back is that I still have what it gave me. 3 stories, 3 people, 3 encounters with something wearing the oldest, most complicated mask in human history. The clown has existed in human culture for thousands of years. Court jesters, harlequins, fools. They existed at the margins, allowed to say and do what others couldn't. allowed to transgress, allowed to wear the exaggerated face that said, I am not serious. I am not real. I am safe. But the mask is just a mask. And what wears a mask is not always what the mask suggests. Daniel Marsh still sleeps with the lights on. He is 41 years old, and he sleeps with the lights on because a thing stood at the end of his driveway in the Georgia night and waved. Renata Voss still works the night shift. She is still steady and still practical. She doesn't go to room 7. And sometimes, on quiet nights when she walks Building C's third-floor corridor, she keeps her eyes forward. She doesn't look into doorways. She doesn't let the silence tell her things. Theo Callahan keeps a plastic flower in a glass jar on a shelf. He lives alone. He works days now. And when he passes that shelf, he pauses, just for a moment, to make sure the lid is still on. These are real people. These are real stories. And somewhere out there tonight, in a yard, in a corridor, on an empty stage in an abandoned building, something with a painted face and a too-wide smile is standing very still, watching, waiting for you to look up. This has been The Scary Collector. If you've been watching with us tonight, thank you. Truly, if you have a story of your own, something you've been carrying alone, something you've never told, you know where to find us. The collection is always open. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.